When we think of time, we usually think of time from a clock or a watch. But clocks and watches tells us the measure of time, like hours, minutes, or seconds. But it fails to tell us what time itself is. So, what is time? Well, we know that time is something that flows from past to present to future. Time flows from past to present and it will flow into future. But how fast does it flow, and does it flow at the same speed for all people? Everyone thought it did until the theory of relativity. 1 hour to me was 1 hour to everyone. But Einstein with his theory on relativity showed that time is not absolute, but it's relative. This is called time dilation. You might have heard the phrase, the faster you go, the
slower you move through time.
So how does that work? Well, imagine a person standing... Whoa! Okay, let's say we both have a light clock. A light clock is basically a box with light bouncing up and down. Now let's say he gets on his spaceship and starts going close to the speed of light. Now from his perspective inside the spaceship, the light just bounces up and down. But when I watch him go by, I'll see his light in this zigzag pattern. Zigzag pattern will be longer than up and down, meaning that the light from my perspective will have to travel a longer distance. And since the speed of light is always constant, I'll see his time running slower. But to him, everything seems normal, so his time will run normal. So the faster he goes, the slower he moves through time. So now we know that time is relative, but there's another thing we know about time. We know that time is used to describe motion. And when we talk about motions, we have coordinates. And in those coordinates, we can go left, we can go right, we can go forward, we can go backward, we can go up, we can go down. But for time, we are always going from past to present to future. Time does not go backwards. So why does time always go forward? But before I answer that question, we need to know what entropy is. Here I have a jar filled with sand. Now when I turn the jar over, the sand will go all over the place. I can do this hundreds of times, but I'll always see a similar result. But can the sand ever come back to the jar? Sure it can, there's nothing stopping it, but the probability of that is very low. There's only one way for it to come back to the jar, whereas there are millions of ways for it to spread out. And that's why we don't see the sand coming back to the jar. This is what entropy is, something going from order to disorder because there are more ways for it to be disordered. The more disordered something is, the more entropy it has. Now entropy happens everywhere, from small things like this jar filled with sand to big things like the universe. Long time ago, universe was just a single point. It had a very low entropy. But after Big Bang, it expanded like crazy, and as time went by, it expanded more. This caused it to have high entropy. So we can see that as time goes by, entropy increases. And since entropy always goes from order to disorder state, time always goes ahead and never backwards. But in this graph, there's an equilibrium, where the universe is at its most disordered state. So what happens there? Well, the universe will be just empty space, and time will have no directions.